Yeah. Our next presenter is Dr. Vijay Kumar, Assistant Professor, my colleague, B.S. Abdul Rahman Crescent Institute of Science and Technology, Chennai. And he's going to talk about the subtle art of writing a research proposal. So please allow me to introduce Dr. Vijay Kumar. Dr. Vijay Kumar is an Assistant Professor of English at Crescent Institute of Science and Technology. He has a PhD in Educational Technology. He has 24 publications to his credit in international journals and has written 5 books. One of his books was a collaborative venture with the Department of Digital Humanities, University of Iowa. Wow. He received a certificate of excellence in reviewing digital access journals in 2020. He has also received a Springer Best Paper Award at the International Conference on Learning and Teaching 2019. He is an editorial member of his Scopus Index Journal, English Language Teaching, published in Canada. Above all, he is my colleague. Dr. Vijay, please, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Very kind of you. So as was introduced, my topic is the subtle art of writing a research proposal. You see, there are many kind of researchers here. Some of you may be early researchers. Some of you may be mid-career researchers. Maybe some of you even on the verge of, submitting your thesis. So regardless of who you are, we always have to lean on our research proposal. Let me actually start with an early researcher who actually needs to write a research proposal. Writing a research proposal is like the blueprint of a building. You know, when an engineer wants to construct a building, he needs a kind of a floor plan, a blueprint. Only when he has a blueprint, he will be able to construct the edifice. Similarly, every research scholar needs a very good plan or a clear outline on how he is going to proceed. So the importance of research proposal is so pivotal. So let me initially focus on the what and give more focus on why and how. So what I'm going to do today is just to give you a very clear matrix of how to write a research proposal. In fact, the earlier sessions have perfectly set a preamble to my talk, because whatever I'm going to say, the elements of a proposal or the elements that could have already been discussed in various forms. But I would like to make it as objective as possible. Perhaps by the end of the session, you should be able to reconceptualize your research proposal, maybe revisit your research proposal. So what I want you to do is, it's not just going to be a mere talk. I want you to walk on a visual journey with me as I present my slides, and each slide and each point, I just want you to self-reflect. And by the end of every segment, I would just give you certain aspects where you deeply think about the research you are doing. Apply those concepts. So by the end of the day, after the session, after the talk, if you can revisit your research proposal and kind of modify it, or if you feel that all the elements that we discussed today are there in your proposal, I think the purpose of this session is fulfilled. Perhaps a tall claim in an 50-minute session, a 1-hour session, but let me try to do justice to it. So let me now present the screen and give you an overview and the segments that I'm going to discuss. So let me present my screen and start my session. So initially, let me give you a broad overview of the areas and then move on to the nitty-gritties of each. So these are the ingredients that I'm going to discuss. These were just like the ingredients of a recipe. Like if you want to prepare a perfect recipe, there should be certain ingredients that go into the recipe. If one of the ingredients isn't to the exact proportion, then perhaps you will not get the desired output. So research also, your research proposal should have a balanced aspects of these points I'm going to discuss. A, it is the working title, because every researcher comes with a working title before they present their first presentation. And it is not only when they present first, but that kind of document that they present earlier, in the early stage of their career, is a blueprint that helps them throughout their research journey. So the importance of a research title cannot be overemphasized. So that is why you see many foreign universities require us to write a full-fledged proposal. But of course, in many places, we just write a small write-up. We don't call it a proposal. So you need to have a blueprint. So what I'm saying is, by the end of the session, you should all revisit your blueprint if you have one. And I'm sure each one of you will have a blueprint of your, how you are going to go about your entire 4 years. The first thing is, it starts with the foundation, laying a very strong foundation, which we call as a research problem. But I would just like to give you a 3-step matrix or a 3-step strategy and apply this 3-step strategy and see if your proposal caters to those 3 requirements. And then I'll move on to second measurable matrix called the research questions. As I said, I'm not just going to explain how to write research questions. Perhaps they have been dealt with earlier. So I will objectify it by talking about what are the benchmarkings for research questions. So there is an international benchmarking for research questions that is called as the finger maps benchmarking. So I'll talk more about that. And then how to write a strong preamble. And I'll move on to the methodology paradigms. I think methodology paradigms is comprehensive, that cannot be distilled in, say, 1 hour. So I will just discuss 2 broad spectrums, which will encompass everything. So I will just give you a cameo shot of the methodology paradigm. And especially people who work on qualitative research may not very strongly apply methodology paradigms. They may apply theoretical paradigms. So what are the benchmarks for applying theoretical paradigms? What are the components? How to apply? So we'll discuss about that. And then this term contribution and novelty is actually a kind of an hackneyed expression in the research context, in the research jargon. Let me talk about the different kinds of contributions a researcher can make. So the researcher can make a contribution at the theoretical level, maybe at the epistemological level. The contribution could be even at the methodological level. The contribution that you make could be at the analytical level. The contribution that you make could be at an ontological level. When I use all these terms, I will give you examples during the course of my presentation to drive home the point more clearly. And ultimately, I'll round up by talking to you how you should document your limitations in the initial part of your proposal. And ultimately, the bottom line is to have a very clear time frame, because you need to have a time frame on how long is it going to complete, what are you going to do in the first 6 months, and what are you going to do 1 year. So that will give you a very clear direction for your work. So I'll discuss with you the time frame ultimately by the end of the day. So these are some of the aspects that we are going to cover, and these are the components of a research proposal in a PhD research proposal. Naturally, for that matter, in any proposal, these are essentially the points, maybe with some changes. But however, I'm focusing today only on benchmark testing of a PhD proposal. So what we are going to do is a kind of a benchmark testing. You are just going to measure on a scale how your research plan is. So after my talk today, go back to your plan, measure it, give your topic or your proposal a benchmark testing. So this is my objective. So as I said, let me now move on to the nitty-gritties. I'm sure that all of you will have, a working title, because you start off with a working title. A working title should kind of encapsulate the essence of your research, and then it should indicate what is your broad area. Your topic should also indicate what is your specific area, and how long should the topic be. We'll discuss about that. And the methodology aspect should also be in your topic. I have given two examples which I have picked from thesis database from West. I have given you both. First, in the context of ELT, facilitating writing skills at tertiary level using computer-aided instruction and empirical study. The second one is the predicament of women as reflected in the works of Arundhati Roy and Anita Desai, a comparative study. Now let us look at these. Let us see if your tentative topic can have these ingredients. But your topic might change, might take a different shape, but there should be ingredients, right? One is your broad area, facilitating writing skills. Writing is very broad. Predicament of women is very broad. So A, you tick the first box, your area is broad. Then is your topic moving to a very narrow zone, like, tertiary level, or reflected in the works of, specific works of. So you are moving actually from broad to specific. And then how long should your title be? Maybe as far as journals are concerned, journals have their own benchmarking. Some journals in their homepage give you the stipulated length that your topic should be 16 words. And some journals say maximum 18. So as far as thesis is concerned, there are no hard and fast rules. Maybe if you read the titles and the patterns of many thesis titles, this is one thing that every researcher who is working on a tentative topic should do. Should just go and make a tentative search in ProQuest database, search a lot of theses related to a domain, and search for titles. Search, research, at least take 25 titles to your area, and then compare your titles and see if your titles fall in those parameters. So how long should your title be? There is no benchmarking. Methodology should be there. Probably in the ELT context, the methodology is there. Similarly, in the second topic, a comparative study. So I hope that you have got a bit of idea on how your working title should be. So this is the first benchmarking. Use this benchmarking and parameters to go and revisit your proposal and see if you cater to these benchmarking. Moving on, research problem. This is the foundation. You are just laying a foundation stone. And again, when we talk about the novelty of work, you see, your research problem should be an area of concern in your work. It need not be new. See, novelty in medical sciences is different. Novelty in empirical sciences is different. Novelty in experimental research is different. And novelty in social sciences is different. We can't use the word one size fits all approach to the word novelty. So if you really look at the subtle layers of novelty in the context of social sciences research or the qualitative research, you may look at an old problem with a new lens. Or you may look at an author who has already been studied many times with a different theoretical lens. So that is also novelty. So the word novelty needs a relook, and it cannot be very carelessly, or you can't use the same benchmark to measure the word novelty in all contexts. So it could be your, you can look at an old problem with a new theoretical lens. Or in the context of ELT, your research problem could be an educational issue. Your research problem could be a controversy in the field. It could be about people having different agreements over a particular issue. Or it could be a condition that you want to improve. Usually it happens during intervention research, as pre-test, post-test. or a kind of an experimental or a quasi-experimental design or a 2 experimental design, regardless of the design. Or your problem could be a difficulty that you want to eliminate. So, and make a kind of a benchmark testing, what kind of research problem is yours. So I'm actually not telling you how to do it. I'm only telling you how you need to do the benchmark testing for a proposal which you have already written. So what are the prerequisites? This is one of the fundamental cornerstones to actually assess your proposal. So ask yourself these questions and tick these boxes. Okay, see these boxes. After choosing your topic, can you enthusiastically pursue the topic? Because some people show the initial euphoria, the initial flair and enthusiasm, but in course of time, the euphoria languishes. You know, they don't show the kind of passion. They feel maybe I don't have enough passion to really sustain this particular topic. So can you sustain it? And very importantly, can you solve within the time frame? I'll give you an example. Suppose you're taking a problem which you can't solve within a time frame. Maybe I am recently reminded of a proposal submission first meeting where a particular research scholar was presenting a work where she was analyzing 4 novels with around 450 pages each. And I was, any particular text has many subtle layers of meanings which are really camouflaged, and to really unravel the different gems and different layers in a particular text, maybe it takes months, and it could even take years if you take one complete work. So I don't know how it could be practically possible to take comprehensive data and deal within the stipulated time. So you can't be over ambitious. You can't bite more than what you can chew. Choose something that's really practicable, something that you can write in 150 words, and something that you can finish in maybe in 4 years. Our aim in kind of this qualitative research or social sciences research or ELT research is not to come out with the groundbreaking findings, but to complete a work by justifying the novelty of the work. Okay, so that is one other benchmarking. And the another benchmarking is your work timely? Is it contemporary? And is it original? When we talk about originality, is your work really original? And how do you identify it is original? The best way to identify originality is, as I said, to visit thesis databases. Researcher at the initial stages should not actually focus on reading journal papers. The researcher should focus on, is my voice clear? I'm just getting a lot of background noise. I hope my voice is clear to you. Is my voice clear?
It's very audible, sir.
Audible. Okay. So you should just make sure, how do you assess originality? Originality cannot be assessed by reading journals at the initial stages of a researcher's career. So the researcher should visit only thesis databases initially. And it's too early to read too much of research papers. Maybe to know the recent papers in your field is fine. And most importantly, this is one particular aspect that you have to consider. Do you have the grounding to solve it? Provide, you have to choose a particular topic which you believe, if you have the necessary skill set to do it, you go for it. Probably if you are a practicing teacher, then you can come and choose ELT. Or probably if your MPhil thesis was on the lines of literature and you have got a lot of grounding on that particular area and expand the same work further, that is all the more better. So this, I think, is one of the most important foundations. Go and ask yourself this question. I am doing this research. Do I have this grounding? It's not about developing skills and coming to, it's too late to develop a particular skill. You already need a set of skills. I'm not saying it's too late. It may take time. So you should have some kind of grounding. So these are the prerequisites in a proposal. But let me come to, how do you find a problem? I spend so much of time on problems because I think problems are the foundations. The remaining parts I just fly through. So I'll spend more time on the problems in a research proposal, because when your problem is wrong, your whole research is wrong. And most importantly, identifying problems is a big challenge. The researcher in the initial stages should identify 10 or 15 problems related to your area of interest. Go and visit your guide earlier and ensure, sir, identify some 15 problems. what do you think about these problems? Or you can have alternative problems that you experience. So how do you identify your problem? People sometimes make very tall claims. They start the first day of the work and they start by saying that this has not been done before. I think that's one of the most careless statement that you expect from a researcher. This has not been done before. And without any kind of an evidential data, without any kind of substantial data to support your claims, without any scientific evidences, you say this has not been done before. So you need to, when you make claims in a talk, you can make claims. But when you make claims in a research proposal, your claims should not be supported by logic. It should be supported by evidence. See, you can assume what is the time now. I assume the time should be somewhere between 10:10. If you ask what is the time now, the time is 10:50. How do you say so? Because it is testable. See the clock. So the clock is an instrument to test. So this is the definition they give for epistemology, which you can really apply in the research context. So you need to have a clear evidence of what you are talking. So your problem should be evidence based. And how else do you find your problems? Do your everyday observations. Maybe if you are a teacher, if you have encountered a lot of challenges in your classroom, then ELT research is suitable. Or if, as an early researcher, form some research groups, in academia and ELT, see related to early researchers or related to your interest, what the other research groups are doing, what are the projects they're doing, what are the theses that are found related to your work. So visit that and then review recent literature. You can't review all the literature. Select 1 or 2 top journals in the field. Take only 5 or 10 papers and review, because you cannot overwhelm yourself with data. You can only be practical. And if possible, look at 1 or 2 government reports which are recent. And most importantly, discuss with the experts. Maybe you are professors in universities. Discuss with them. And then you come and discuss about your problem. So these are some of the things you need to do before you write your proposal, or in fact you need to write a synthesis of all. And if you have done that, I think your proposal will be a perfect proposal. Again, the word perfection doesn't exist. It could be, it will be a better proposal, where you can just chisel your way through and make a fine proposal. So it should have all this. If you haven't done, please revisit on those lines, work on your problem. So moving ahead. Now let me just give you a process of the problem. A, study broad. B, as I said, what are the list of possible areas on the topic you are doing? Suppose you are choosing a particular author for a qualitative study and you are just going to analyze the author. What kind of analysis you want to subject the author to? What is the theoretical lens you are going to use? What is the theoretical lens that other researchers have used? Is it possible to? So what are the possible areas you can discuss the author? You see. And then just dig that, narrow and dig deeper. And now you list what are the unresolved problems and then identify the problem. So this is a process for identifying the problem. If you have not, as I said, it's like a recipe. If you follow the process, you will get the desired dish. If you don't follow any one of the process, you may end up messing up the whole thing. I hope you get my point. So moving on, there is a 3-step formula. Let me not go through the entire aspects. I've just given you some examples which you can read later. So let me move through. The 3-step formula is, the first formula is what is your actual problem. So go and write your problem. For example, for writing, if a researcher is choosing on writing, the researcher writes this problem. There has always been debates and controversies regarding pedagogical strategies for fostering writing. So a researcher who is working on writing, there is no standard benchmarking or no standard pedagogy for writing. There could be approaches like process approach, product approach, or the process genre approach, the process product approach. You may have approaches, but do you have a set of applied strategies? So she kinds of writes her problem. After doing all the steps, you can't write a problem if you haven't followed the steps which I told you earlier. Now, after writing the problem, justify the problem. There are a few researchers who I know who work on TBLT. And when they say TBLT is a field which is not being much used in the context of teaching speaking. In that case, did they read the books of Rod Ellis? Did they read Willis? Did they read David Newman? So you have to look at the leading players in your industry, people who are the leaders. You read them and then you justify the problem. At least you should know these books. What are the books related to your area? So researchers maybe who are, before they justify the problem, that this is really a problem that merits deeper investigation, that this is a problem that merits further investigation, then you need to justify it based on those books, based on evidences. And then you expand on what are the deficiencies and give proof. Rod Ellis has discussed this. David Newman has discussed this. And you, after discussing all this, Willis has discussed this, leading players. And anybody who sees that, okay, this researcher has read some of the recent works. So it's true that their problem is an approachable problem. I mean, this research problem is not only applicable for the early career researchers or the mid researchers, even for a seasoned researchers who write the research papers. If you start writing a research paper, you need to measure and use these benchmarking strategies to measure your research. Measure this and then go on and start your work. Don't actually jumpstart your work. And if you do that, probably it could be a springboard to you. So let me move on. So this is a worksheet. Maybe after the end of the day, you just go back and try to fill in these columns. Say what's the actual problem, justify the problem, and give the deficiency. So go back to your proposal which you have written and see, regardless of the researcher who you are, if you have midway or even if you've almost written the work, just go back. And as I said, this is like a map. It is not even like a map, it is like a GPS. If you want to go to a destination, you check it. I mean, you set a GPS and the GPS takes you. So whenever you are confused, it's like a lighthouse. Go back to your lighthouse, take back your proposal. See, just review your proposal, revisit. So it's like an engineer going back to the floor plan. So that maybe he doesn't make a mistake. Probably after constructing the outer structure, he doesn't need the floor plan. He can dismantle it. Once he has laid a very strong foundation, he can dismantle it. But you need to dismantle because the context is different. You need a proposal because some people write proposals and kind of discard it. But you need proposal and you need to revisit the proposal. So just go back, see your proposal and apply these 3 segments that I am talking about. So do a lot of self-reflection. And this is one of the fundamental traits of a researcher. Because you need to keep mulling over about your problem. You need to spend a lot of time not reading. Maybe read, after reading, you should need to digest what you read. And the only way to do that, some people are really quite greedy in reading. They want to read a lot. And this kind of flair and that enthusiasm for collecting data, we all did that when we were early researchers. We kind of collected too much of data that overwhelmed us, and we spent a lot of time in collecting it and a little time in reflecting it, little time in digesting it, and little time in masticating it. So spend a lot of time to take only one topic, read it. You read one research paper for one day, you need to reflect on the problem of the research paper and see how it is applicable in your context for 1 week. So mull over it. That is the only way. Only then you can narrow down and talk about the significance of the problem. I'll give you more examples on novelty and what I meant with that, or what I meant with contribution using practical examples. Now we have set the scene, we have set the context. You have a very strong foundation. Your problem is very strong. You have justified your problem. Now let's move on to the pillars. After constructing the edifice, it's time to actually construct your pillars. And these pillars, we are moving, is called the research question. And how do you frame the research question? And the research question should always be an offshoot of your research problem. Research question should always be an offshoot of your research problem. See your research problem, and from there you pick up your research question, because you kind of actually further refine the problem. You actually add more focus to the problem, and that will guide you to access it, to refine it, and revisit. So let me give you examples of such research questions. after giving you a benchmark called finger maps, let us say your broad topic. Okay, we will just discuss more examples later. Let me first give you the benchmarking strategies. Let us say you formulate 1 or 2 research questions. Okay, because you raise the question after a problem and see all through your work if you can answer that question or those questions. First thing is, are your questions feasible? Which means, do you have enough resources? Is your field too narrow? You should see that is feasibility. Of course, feasibility can also be applied to methodology. 2, is your work very interesting? Are there academic debates? If everybody agrees with the field, if there is strong consensus, if there is a pedagogy which everybody reported is very strong in the classroom context, if many of the 90% of the report documents say that this is a very effective method, what is the point in researching it? So, are there academic debates in the field? So, is it interesting? 3, novelty. Does your work establish new facts? And then, is it ethical? Okay, are you avoiding deceptive practices? Are you kind of just reporting or falsifying or duplicating data for the sake of completing it? Okay, and then is it manageable within the time frame? As I said, are you really biting more than what you can chew? And then, is it really appropriate, context specific? And then, is it publishable? This is very important. Many researchers do ask that question. I really am struggling because we come across these kind of questions in every workshops that give me some suggestions to publish. What are some of the journals that the scope of journals to publish? Name these journals. There could be umpteen number of journals, but is your work publishable? If your work is publishable, the problem should be very strong. The research question should be strong. If your foundation is very strong and the pillars are very strong, it is publishable. Some people spend 4 or 5 years because they have all done the mistake. Now, I have not produced some groundbreaking research. I learned making many mistakes just as you all did. That is why I am sharing. And perhaps I am able to, I'm just driving home all these points because I am not giving subjective data. I am giving you data based on my experiences, based on my harrowing experiences. So, you have to, it is good to learn from others' mistakes, isn't it? So that we don't repeat it. So, is your work publishable? What is publishable? Is your area niche? Is it something really narrow? Try that. And is it systematic? So this is called as a finger mapping strategy. It is very difficult for me to give you benchmarking examples of all these, perhaps in a time span of, basically I have only 20 minutes left. I can't give you more examples. I'll just give you the slide, go and revisit it and see if your work follows these benchmarks. But let me move on to the research questions. Every researcher here, there are only 2 kinds of researchers who are working on literature, researchers who are working on ELT. Regardless of your discipline, you frame these 3 kinds of research questions. The first kind is, your research could be descriptive. What is going on is descriptive in your field. What exists? Again, I have picked some examples here from thesis databases, from research questions. Descriptive research. What are the current practices in teaching speaking? Okay, the initial research question could be primary, not the secondary research question, maybe to find the problem. Then, what is the significance of myth in the novels of Bharati Mukherjee? You raise the questions in order to answer and zero in. These are called as descriptive questions. There are some questions which are observational or relational, which shows the studies between 2 or more variables. This is kind of comparison, where we talk about, comparative research. Which approach is more effective for speaking? Is CLT or TBLT? Now, this is definitely a niche area. Maybe CLT and TBLT, they definitely both cannot be compared because this research has already been done many times. But if you take a new field or if you take a dogmatic teaching and blend it with TBLT, that could definitely be a niche field because not many would have done. Maybe you can just Google and see that. So, try to blend approaches that people usually don't blend. Because it's like a theoretical level. People take one theory from management and blend it in the context of literature and discuss in the context of ELT. People take, I have seen a lot of, sometimes I wonder, why is that the Westerners produce such impactful journals Is there something fundamentally wrong with my language? Of course, but ultimately the point that I'm trying to dive home is there's no problem with the language. You all produce robust research, but I believe that it all boils down to the use of, application of novelty. You don't expect them to pick a theory from psychology, from medical humanities, and blend it in the context of ELT and find a problem based on that, which is real, and discuss it. And that becomes real empirical research, real research that can be contributed, that is very novel at different levels. It's the word novelty is multi-layered, as I said earlier. When I said multi-layered, maybe at a theoretical level, as I said, epistemological level, pedagogical level. So that do some unexpected things, not an expected thing. You take a research, theory which is least unexpected and blend it in your context. If you don't believe what I say, just go and look at journals which publish high impact factor publications. You will understand what I mean. And then the third kind of methodology is called as causal comparative. Studies cause and effect. How does blended instruction impact teaching performance? It's a kind of intervention research. But I usually don't find much topics on intervention research in the context of literature teaching. So moving on, there are only 3 benchmarkings here. Initially, your research questions are broad. You restrict it, you narrow it, you specify it. This is actually called a benchmarking, where I will just give you only one example, the last example from the literature context. Poems of Robert Frost. Very, very broad. Take something very broad. Restrict it. Literary devices in the Frost poems. Again broad, but somewhat restricted. Imagery in the poems of Robert Frost is something very narrow. And then the types of imagery in Robert Frost. 3 or 4 research questions. What are the kinds of auditory imagery in the poems of Robert Frost? Or how does visual imagery impact the readers in Robert Frost poems? Or how does kinesthetic imagery impact the readers? So this is specific. So you get my point. So you move from broad to restricted to narrow to specific whenever you formulate research questions. So your benchmarking rubric is go back with this research question worksheet, note down what is your broad topic, see if you can specify, list out possible questions in your area, and your question should be WH questions which are answerable, no just yes or no questions, and what is the outcome you expect. So let me just move to that. So it is like, moving something broad, you just come and just narrowing it down. Now you have set a preamble. So the perfect preamble is ready. So you have justified your literature with problems, with questions, and gap. Again, this word gap is also a kind of a hackneyed cliche in the research, context. People all talk about gap. There is definitely, but how do you identify gap? Because in your proposal, there is a particular test called acid test. Probably we are not discussing about chemical research, but go back, revisit your research questions, and give your research questions an acid test. What do I mean by acid test? Go back to the previous slides, see if your research question falls in the ambit of finger maps. At least if your research question caters to the 4 aspects or 3 aspects of the finger maps, then you pass the acid test, or else you fail the acid test. B, how else do you pass the acid test in gap? Just go and see the kind of research questions which I showed you earlier. And the best way to identify your research gap is to, another simple tip I would like to give you for the budding researchers who will not have so much of time at your resources, is to not read a lot of journal papers, but to read meta-analytic reviews, to read scooping reviews, and to read systematic reviews. For most of the fields, empirical fields, there are these 3 kinds, but for literature fields, you might find a systematic review. If you take those reviews and see the gap discussed by that particular researcher, and if it is very similar to what you have articulated, then there is research gap. Another way to find the research gap, look at identical theses in your area, because you have made a ProQuest, collected 5 theses very much pertaining to area. Look at the gap. Are those gaps similar? I'm not saying the gap should be a carbon gap. Are they
Sir,
similar?
your voice is not clear, sir.
Is it clear now? Hello, is my voice clear now?
Better. It's better, sir.
Better. All right. Okay. So the components of an introduction I was discussing, give your review of literature, and as it is, go back to the previous slides. Let me now discuss on the methodology paradigms. There are only 2 paradigms in your research proposal. One is called the theoretical paradigm and the other is called the empirical paradigm. You have to apply the golden circle paradigm for your theoretical approach. Okay, let me give you an example of what I mean by that. When you do research, theoretical research, let me initially focus on methodology, because methodology is not applicable to all. Methodology perhaps is applicable for ELT researchers. Let me give you a framework initially for theoretical research. Is my voice quite okay now?
Yes,
Yes, sir,
Dr.
it's
Vijay, it's
audible, sir.
audible. It's audible, Dr. Vijay.
Okay, all right. See, I will give you examples in the literature context talking about theoretical approach. See, when we talk about theoretical approach and novelty and how to bring novelty in theory, what usually Westerners do with theory is, when they take a particular theory, they blend it with another theory. And if you are presenting the theory as it is, then perhaps it is a theoretical framework. If you are bringing some new iterations to the particular theory, if you are bringing in some new components to the particular theory from a different field, then it is a conceptual framework. So, if you can iterate the theory that you are working on, then you can make a significant contribution at the theoretical level. So I'm going back to my first point when I'm talking about the different kinds of contributions which you will emphasize in your proposal. The first emphasis is, you can, when I say you can make a contribution at a theoretical level, if you can blend the theories and iterate on the theories, bring in new iterations to a particular theory, then it is conceptual. How to do that? I will just give you an example. Let me give you an example from the literature context, and the example that I'm going to give you is suitable both in the ELT as well as the language context. So I'm going to tell you how to apply a particular theory. So let us say that you take a theory. The theory could be theory of socio-constructivism, or it could be the collaborative learning theory. First thing is, when you write your research proposal, you should give a preamble for the theory. Why have you chosen that particular theory? Secondly, can you define the theory? Somebody asked you, this is a theory that I'm working on. So let's say this question is asked. Please define your theory in 2 or 3 sentences. Can you clearly define the theory? Okay, because it just happens. In your research proposal, you have written a research proposal, there is a particular activity that people do. This is called the pitching. You are going in an elevator with your friend. You have only 3 minutes to talk about your research proposal, what your entire thesis is, articulate your research proposal in 2 minutes. By the time the elevator reaches the first floor to 3 floor, can you articulate with clarity? If you can, then you have a clear idea what you are doing. So, when you are talking about the theory, clearly define what your theory is. 3, how to apply the theory. Talk what is the basic premise of the theory. 4, who are the proponents of the theory? Who actually propagated the theory? What are the offshoots of the theory? Only when you know these kind of variables, you know the theory deeply, and then you write a strong rationale of why that particular theory fits in the ambit of your research. If it is an ELT research, what are the variables of the theory? And then if it is a literature research, how does your characters exhibit certain traits that the theory emulates? And then the critical evaluation of the primary sources of the theory. There could be people who do not have consensus on that particular theory. There could be people who have deconstructed it, who could have debunked its logic. So you will be talking, you will know the other side of the coin, and then you will know what is the practical application of the theory and know what are the limitations of applying the theory, and only then you will choose the theory. And if you do that, then perhaps you make a contribution at the theoretical level. So your proposal, when you write a theory, make sure you know the proponents, you know the leading players, you know the controversies in the field, and then you write a strong rationale of why you choose a theory. Because people talk about theory, they don't have a strong rationale. They take a theory and they just fit the theory into their work. It doesn't work that way. You may end up, your work may end up in an absolute fiasco. So I discussed about there are only two paradigms. As I said, to discuss about methodology in the research proposal is a broad spectrum in itself. So I'm discussing only two broad layers. One is thematic research, and the other is what they call as experimental or empirical research. Thematic research is about familiarizing, about exploring the subtle layers, about trying to look at the text with a microscopic eye and pick out the hidden gems that are camouflaged in the text using the particular theory, and then searching for the themes which are relevant to the research questions, reviewing the themes, revisiting the themes, interpreting the themes, and finally producing a report. This is how you do it. Now, the second paradigm is a kind of a statistical paradigm where you actually use the benchmarking of a kind of an experimental research of a pre-test, post-test, subject your data to rigorous statistical analysis like the t-test or the ANOVA test. And definitely there are certain analytical benchmarks that you should follow when you're writing research papers or when you write your thesis. Because when you are doing empirical research, if your analysis is weak, I'm sure that a research in the initial stages, you will not have a clear idea of analysis. So you need not talk about the analysis. So you can just give a rough outline of analysis. So what I'll do is, I have maybe another 5 minutes. I'll try to wind up at the earliest and probably give myself a lot of time to take questions, because that will be all the more meaningful to round up the discussion. So what I would like to do is, methodology cannot be, as I said, cannot be covered. I would like to give you a particular book called as the Research Onion. Regardless of the method that you are approaching in your field, it could be a theoretical research, it could be a data collection research, it could be a cross-sectional research, it could be a longitudinal research, it could be ethnographic research, or whatever it is. The whole spectrum, you go to the book on Research Onion. You cannot master this in your lifetime. That will be ridiculous. My research is mixed methods research, and I spent 3 months to know my method inside out. I am a researcher who is very practical, or else I am over ambitious. I will not hit the bullseye. I will be throwing stones in the dark hoping to hit the bullseye. So you have to pick only one method that you are working on, choose the method, read the method, reread the method. Similarly, if you use a particular theory, as I said before, learn that particular theory inside out. Knowing too much is the biggest danger for a researcher. Knowing something very narrow and knowing deep is wise. So that is a suggested research. I may not have time for giving you a work schedule matrix, but there are a lot of free work schedule matrices available online. Gantt chart, first year, what should a researcher do? Divided into months, see if you are doing, have a clear roadmap. If you really need a mountain to climb. If you don't have a mountain, you can't climb, right? So have a very clear work schedule. There are umpteen number of resources. Go back to your proposal, take this proposal. I have given you a cycle here. In order to take more questions, I'll wind up with this and look at this proposal cycle, revisit, see if your proposal has all these layers. Okay, so I'll just ultimately wind up with two important pointers. What is important, as I said, is topic knowledge. Research knowledge comes later. Do you have enough grounding in your topic? And two, find the literature similar to yours and read only that. Don't read too much of information. So with this, I would just like to wind up one more final point. Three things you need to remember as a researcher. A, dig deeper and dig narrow. And B, you have to ask yourself the question why. Because it is why that has infused the humankind. It is why that has infused researchers. It is why that has produced groundbreaking research. First of all, have a clear idea of why you are doing what you are doing. So ask yourself this question, why? And ultimately, very, very important is robust writing. Usually they don't use these words, robust and writing. Probably this doesn't match, but I'm using the word purposefully when I say robust writing. Polish your writing skills, because there is something called robust research. Ultimately, it all boils down to what kind of phraseology you use to document your work, what kind of precise expressions you use, what kind of terminologies you use, and how precise your benchmark is. So, three things I would like to tell you is dig deep and ask yourself why you are doing it, and polish your language skills to document. Unfortunately, there is one common claim that most of the Asian research, though it is really robust, does not see daylight because of weak language. What a pathos. So I would just like to stop with this, and I've just given you some references here, and I would be willing to take any questions if you have. I'm sure that you will have a lot of questions. And ultimately, if you can go out with more questions, I'm sure ultimately one important point is by the end of the talk, if you go with more questions than answers, I think the purpose of the talk is fulfilled. Because many researchers think, okay, I just came and attended, but I didn't get answer to my particular question. But the real fact with researchers is you always should go with more questions than the answers, and that is what will improve you as a researcher. I'll stop with this and be open to take as many questions as possible. Maybe within the stipulation.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay. Thank you very much for the ideas and suggestions presented here for writing a research proposal. And I believe the analogy of a recipe suggested by you for writing a research proposal conveys a sound, realistic, practical approach towards penning down a research proposal. It's not only the recipe you have provided, but you have also given the cooking manual in a user-friendly way. So my compliments and thank you for putting down your ideas in a very straightforward and structured manner. I hope we all have enjoyed this brilliant presentation. Now, Dr. Vijay, this is the time. Let me take some questions over here. The first question I see over here, this is Siva Subramaniam. Sir, how would we incorporate novelty in attempting research in language?
Novelty in attempting research in, is it language or language teaching?
Just language.
Language.
Sure.
Yeah, as I said, if you are documenting your research, the simple, straightforward answer could be, you can try to blend two theories that people don't expect. People will expect if you make a comparative pre-test post-test on TBLT and CLT, try something very different that others have not approached. So you can bring some novelty. Two, there is another way to bring a novelty at the methodological level. Some people would have applied a method which has already been applied. For example, there are only two paradigms: qualitative paradigm, quantitative paradigm. How did this mixed method paradigm crop up? Because the researcher tried something new And from then on, it is called a mixed method. So try a different method, try a different approach, try a different pedagogy. That is the only way you can bring novelty in language research. Or probably you can even try some different linguistics elements. If you explore the field of linguistics or semantics, there are again different areas which you can blend into language teaching, which can make your work more applied in the context of language. These are the three ways. These are the three ways.
A lot of people have expressed their commendations for your research paper, and if there is anyone who wants to ask question, please come out. And the people are asking for the feedback, and it has been posted over here. I think looks like.
Good evening, sir.
The people, yes.
Yes.
Dear Rajesh, do you want to ask something?
Yes, of course, sir.
Okay, please go ahead.
May I please?
Oh, yes, yes.
First, I should thank the speaker for the session. Actually, I'm a young researcher. In my early days of my research, I cannot put into words the kind of contribution that the speaker has had and will have in my future and present research. Can I go to my question, please, sir?
Of course, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Yes. Regarding the criterion to choose the area of research, the last and very important point, according to me, is that I should look for an area that is relevant to me. Maybe like something like maybe I can give an analogy. I'm a language trainer. So according to your suggestion, I should go for something to do with ELT. But let this beg to differ when I say that my area of interest lies with linguistics. And though it is not directly relevant to ELT, and though I may not be able to get practical experience and exposure to my linguistic research in my profession, I strongly believe that this enlightenment, that exposure I get my linguistics research would make me a better trainer in the long run. And I would like to know your thoughts on this, sir, please.
Yeah, thank you. That's just a brilliant question. See, if you are trying to venture into your field, which you believe, maybe you may have the passion, you may have the flair, but you have the strong grounding. You have because linguistics is, it's a broad spectrum. And to bring, generally at the surface level, we may talk. Probably we can choose some theories like, written discourse or spoken discourse, which is very much applied in the linguistic field. Probably at the subjective level, we may understand. But at the deeper level, if you want to apply, then perhaps you need to spend a lot of time in finding your niche in that area. And if you are absolutely confident that you have understood the fundamental premises of that particular branch, and if you feel that they are really relevant to the context that you are going to deal with, then you can definitely go ahead and bring novelty. That entirely depends on not only the confidence level, but also the expertise and the grounding that you have in a different field. Thank you, sir, for the question.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, please.
So, dear participants, if you have any question, or if you have any questions at a later stage, you have the phone number of Dr. Vijay. You can always connect him. And we consider him as an icon of research in our department, and we are proud to have him as a good researcher and as a good teacher and as a good faculty and everything. So it's time to wrap up now. It's going to be 3 minutes past 8. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. Tomorrow we are having the last session of this SCTP series. Our tomorrow's speakers are Dr. Chumiki Biswas, ELT researcher and trainer in Mumbai. And the topic discussed will be identifying niche areas in research. And the other speaker, our next speaker, will be Dr. P. Harshini, Associate Professor, Dr. MGR Educational and Research Institute, Chennai. And her title would be Using Online Tools for Language Correction. Thanks again for joining.